Now, another example, not so good example, I felt was we have to also be careful that when you try to get the market to deliver a social product, it may not work so well. One good example is the design and build DBSS that HDB does. HDB thought that maybe everyone is tired of the HDB design, so maybe, I don't know how long ago, 6 years or so ago, 7 years ago, they introduced this product called the DBSS, thinking that you could sell land to the private sector to build public housing, all right? But because they thought they should not tie the market up, you wanted variety and you think the market can deliver a very good social product, they do not control the price because they thought that HDB in building public housing already would pose sufficient competition to the private developer who buy the land for the DBSS to keep him honest so that his price would not be too high, thinking that HDB is going to compete in the market with him. Did that happen? No, because look at the headlines I read in the newspaper. Everybody is saying it's so expensive. Can HDB please put a cap on the pricing when you sell the land to the private developer to build public housing? I won't go into the dynamics and the details of this, but these two examples really show that I think planners and the government must understand the market. If I were to sell a piece of land or in the planning of the Marina Bay area, I have to think like the developer to get the best out of him. But my objective is to secure and shape a very beautiful city for Singapore. So I think it's juxtaposing the two.
Thank you. Chye, maybe you can answer the question posed directly to you.
Sure. Question is about whether Singapore's model of high density, high livability is applicable to other cities. If you take the case of China, and you look at the cities in China, you look at Beijing, for example, it is now 13 million people. And for some of you who have been to Beijing, you can see the very serious problems they have. They now have 7 ring roads. It's a very sprawling city. Traffic jams are really a huge problem. The Chinese themselves, at the very highest level, Prime Minister Li Keqiang has already been very conscious of the problem of urbanization in China being not quite the right way, sprawling, a lot of environmental problems. And I think they know, for example, that a lot of the cities have been growing by mayors of cities acquiring agricultural land cheap, selling it to developers, and as a result you have this sprawl of cities, which is really not a good way, not sustainable. So China's urbanization strategy now is really to concentrate, make cities more dense, and therefore people, they almost have to go back to public transport and bicycles perhaps. But I think that's something they are very, very seriously, at least at the top, thinking about. The National Development and Reform Commission, which is in charge of urbanization strategy in China, in fact, they are very serious about it. They send 90 of their top officials to Center for Liveable Cities to discuss some of these issues. Yeah, so there is some relevance of what we are doing, at least to China, if I think other cities, other countries as well.
Thank you, Chye. Ian, do you want to answer the question about Venice in Singapore? Is Singapore in danger of declining as Venice did after hitting the peak?
I was going to answer another question, but I'll answer that. The values, yeah, I think Singapore is at a really critical time right now, and it's not just values. So a young kid who's just starting out, or a young couple who's just starting out, they need a fair amount of cash just to get going. And where are they going to get that cash? Unless their parents are rich, or they sell their flat and move into a smaller flat, free up some cash. So this tremendous increase in standard of living. The question is it sustainable? Can you do the miracle again in the next generation? And I think a lot of people are worried about that, and I think they're right, because with that, to link back to a previous question, I'm a true believer in optimism and happiness and limiting corruption. There's corruption everywhere, but you have to limit it. And Switzerland limits it. Switzerland has a completely different system. where we vote 3 times, 4 times a year on referendums. There's many ways to get to the same end, but the key is optimism and honesty and people who work hard. And so you can get there. But I think, yes, I think there's a real critical moment right now. And for the students who are studying this, it's a really exciting time to be a student, because you might witness a complete change in the way better nations do their job, or you might not, depending on what happens. But I think there are certainly clouds on the horizon that need to be addressed, and it's an exciting time to be studying this sort of thing.
Okay. There are 5 students waiting to ask a question. Why don't we hear all their questions, and then I'll ask the panel to respond in a composite way. So there are 2 on this side. Could both of you ask a question? Please,
Yeah.
you start.
First, I'd like to say that there was a graph that was shown that said that Vancouver, which is where I'm from, is apparently the most livable city on this planet. And I'd like to say I'm pleasantly surprised on my exchange here in Singapore and slightly incredulous at what's been achieved. We've talked a lot about economic efficiency and logistical efficiency, and I'm an economics student, and that's what keeps me up at night. But and specifically the word model, but not enough focus, I think, on the word city. And to me, city represents the culture and community and the people and the lives that they live. And so I'd be very curious to hear your inputs as to how you build into, when you're planning for the future of a city or a country or wherever, how you plan for the unplannable. How do you plan for the organic culture that the people make as a result?
Okay, thank you. Please.
Sorry, thank you. My question is somewhat a solution to his question, which is that I think that there's been a lot of bad press given to sprawling cities where the urban planning is in perhaps a greatest control in how the urban network is being built. Like, for example, Japan, Paris. These cities are cities which, although they are sprawling, they are actually rich in culture, where people have greater participation in how the city actually works out. So my question today is, to what extent do you see that a lower government control on how the city structure works would increase the amount of arts and culture and community involvement and pride in the country? And do you foresee Singapore being such a city in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, obviously you have friends in the audience who like your question. Yes?
Hi, my name is Cedric. I'm a final year computer science student at Tembusu. My question is actually related to what they asked, so it's going to be easy for you. A city is more than a sum of its parts. For instance, when you talk about New York, you usually talk about its music, its culture, its vibrancy. And you talk about Tokyo, there's this certain Tokyo-ness that's weird and Japanese. If you talk about Paris, there's this romantic ideal. When you talk about Amsterdam, you talk about mushrooms. There's this sense that there's a vibe or a spirit to a great city, right? And one way I've heard this expressed is that different cities tell you different things. If you live in Hell's Kitchen, for instance, New York tells you that you need to be richer or cooler. San Francisco tells you that you need to be weirder. So Cambridge, Massachusetts tells you that you need to be smarter. I have 2 questions. My first question is slightly cheeky.
What does Singapore stand for?
Yes, what does Singapore tell you? If there's a message that Singapore sends, study harder, maybe, I don't know. I want to hear from you. My second question is more serious. From a city planner's perspective, how do you treat this ephemeral spirit-like thing, especially when you want to build Singapore to be a great city?
Okay.
We've heard a bit about that from Dr. Cheong.
All right, okay, great question. You please, 2 of you.
Hi, I'm a 3rd-year architecture student from Tembusu. In regards to the population paper, the recent population paper, I was wondering whether, what are your opinions towards the growth of Singapore in regards of the population, and whether, well, it's proven through your presentation that there has been a lot of progress, like from the Raffles plan to now the master plan. But is this growth, when does this kind of growth become detrimental to Singapore?
Okay.
Like, there has been growth, but is it good growth? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. It's an optimal, I guess,